by leaving a comment below. If you enjoy this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. Have a wonderful day. Enjoy the story, everyone. Lila woke up to the sound of running water. Running water that definitely wasn't coming from her tiny Chicago apartment. She opened her eyes slowly and found herself staring at an impossibly high ceiling, golden moldings, and a chandelier that cost more than her car. What the heck? She sat up in the enormous bed, noticing she was still fully dressed in yesterday's clothes. Blue dress shirt and jeans. Fragmented memories from the night before started coming back. Storm, canceled flight, taxi with outdated GPS, sleepy receptionist, shoot, wrong room. At that exact moment, the bathroom door opened, and out came a dark-haired man brushing his teeth, wearing only a towel around his waist. They stared at each other for 3 seconds in complete silence. He still had the toothbrush in his mouth. Lila jumped from the bed like she'd been electrocuted, tripped over her own feet, and fell, sitting on the floor. The man spat out the toothpaste in the sink and came running out of the bathroom. "Who the heck are you?" Lila yelled from the floor, her brown hair forming a messy halo around her head. "I live here," the man responded, also looking panicked, clutching his towel like a lifeline. "You live in a hotel?" Lila blinked. "It's my hotel." The man blinked back for 5 seconds. They stared at each other in complete silence, processing this information. "You own the hotel?" Lila asked more quietly, still sitting on the cold marble floor. "Technically, my father does." "But yes." He grabbed a robe from a nearby chair, wrapping it around himself with dignity that somehow made him look even more intimidating. "You're either a very poorly prepared burglar, or I'm an architect," Lila protested, as if that explained everything. "That doesn't explain why you're in my bed." Lila looked around. The room was indeed spectacular. Floor-to-ceiling windows with a Manhattan view, furniture that cost more than her entire apartment, and a TV the size of a wall. "Oh, done. Eloquent. I got the wrong room." Lila stood up quickly, smoothing her wrinkled shirt. "The storm. The canceled flight. I got here at dawn. The receptionist was half asleep and gave me the wrong key. I was too exhausted to notice this room is bigger than my house. And breathe." Lila stopped talking and looked at him. He had stood up, too, and was wearing a black silk robe, which somehow made him look even more intimidating. He was annoyingly handsome, like he'd been designed by a committee of frustrated women to be as attractive as possible. "What's your name?" he asked, running his hand through his dark hair. "Lila Martinez." "And you?" "Ethan Sterling." "Lila Feltar Bloodfriese." "Sterling? Like Sterling Hotels?" "The very chain." "Oh, goodness." Lila dropped into the nearest armchair. "I slept in the bed of a hotel chain heir. I'm going to be sued. They're going to deport me. I'm going to become a TikTok meme." Ethan studied her with a strange expression. "You're not from New York." "Chicago. I came for a super important presentation today at 9 inches the morning that will decide whether my company survives or if I end up living on the street, eating instant ramen for the rest of my life." Lila looked at the clock on the wall, "which is in 2 hours, and I don't even know where my bags are." "Your bags are in my closet. You dragged them there at 3. 0 inches the morning, talking about fun organization." Lila covered her face with her hands. "Was I drunk?" "No. Just very determined and talking in your sleep." Ethan hesitated. "You also reorganized my work desk and left a post-it with suggestions for improving the room's decor." Lila peeked between her fingers. "And they were good suggestions." At that moment, the room phone rang. Ethan answered. "Hello?" "Yes, Dad. I know what time it is." "What do you mean? The press is downstairs?" Longer pause. "You did what?" Lila watched Ethan's expression go from confusion to pure horror. "No, Dad. I am not engaged." "Pause. What do you mean? You already confirmed it." "Pause. You said what? To Forbes?" Ethan hung up the phone and turned to Lila with an expression she could only describe as impending apocalypse. "My father just announced to Forbes magazine that I'm engaged. Congratulations to you." Lila blinked. "To me? To you? But we've literally known each other for 10 minutes. 7 minutes and 40 seconds. But who's counting?" Ethan started pacing back and forth. "He saw you leaving the penthouse elevator at 6, 0 inches the morning, assumed you were my secret girlfriend, and decided it was the perfect time to pressure our investors about international expansion by announcing a serious commitment in the family." That's Lila searched for the right words. "Completely insane. Welcome to the Sterling family, where drama is our breakfast." The phone rang again. Ethan looked at it like it was a venomous snake. "If I don't answer, they'll come up." He looked at her. Lila Martinez from Chicago. You have 2 seconds to decide. Do you want to be my fake fiancé for an undetermined amount of time? Or do you want to explain to the national press how you broke into the Sterling Hotel Air's room? Lila looked at Ethan, looked at the phone, looked at her wrinkled shirt and her desperate professional situation. What are the health plan benefits? Ethan smiled for the first time since waking up. The best in Manhattan. Deal. He answered the phone. Hello, Dad. Yes, she said yes. Lila watched as Ethan grabbed a folder from his desk and pulled out an official-looking document. What's that? She whispered. Standard confidentiality agreement. He whispered back, covering the phone. All hotel guests sign it, but this one's more comprehensive. He handed her the paper. Sign this, and you're officially protected under Sterling Hotel's privacy policies. No one can legally publish anything about you without our consent. Lila quickly scanned the document. It was indeed a confidentiality agreement, but one that also included clauses about family member protection and media relations protocols. She grabbed a pen and signed her name at the bottom, just as they heard voices in the hallway. Done, she whispered. Ethan hung up and looked at the signed document with something that might have been relief. Congratulations, Lila Martinez. You're now officially a Sterling. Quick, Ethan whispered, straightening his tie with the precision of a surgeon. What's my favorite color? How would I possibly know that? Lila hissed back, trying to fix her hair using the reflection in a silver picture frame. Because you're supposedly my fiancé. We've been engaged for exactly 3 minutes. The voices in the hallway were getting louder. Lila could distinctly hear someone saying, exclusive interview and relationship timeline. Blue, Ethan said quickly. My favorite color is navy blue. Yours is green. You love Italian food. You're afraid of spiders. And we met at a coffee shop in Soho 6 months ago. I hate coffee. You hate coffee. I'm allergic to caffeine. Makes me break out in hives. Ethan stared at her like she'd just announced she was from Mars. Who doesn't drink coffee in New York? People who don't want to look like they have chicken pox. A knock echoed through the room. Mr. Sterling, this is Olivia Tran from Financial Times. Your father said you'd be available for a few questions. Ethan grabbed Lila's hand. Listen, we met at a bookstore. You were buying architecture books. I was there for business magazines. Love at first sight. Got it? That's terribly cliched. Do you have a better story? Lila thought for exactly 2 seconds. We bumped into each other at MoMA. You spilled your drink on my portfolio. I threatened to sue you. You offered to buy me dinner as an apology. That's actually not bad. I'm an architect. I'm good at building stories too. Another knock. More insistent this time. Showtime, Ethan muttered, squeezing her hand. Remember, you're madly in love with me. Right. How hard can it be? Ethan opened the door to reveal a petite Asian woman with perfectly styled hair, holding a tablet and wearing a smile that could cut glass. Behind her stood a photographer with enough equipment to film a small movie. Olivia Tran, Financial Times, she said, extending her hand to Ethan. And you must be the mysterious fiancé we've all been hearing about. Lila Martinez, Lila said, stepping forward with what she hoped was a radiant smile. Though I prefer to think of myself as the lucky one rather than mysterious. Olivia's eyes lit up like a hunter spotting prey. How refreshing. Most Hotel Air's girlfriends are usually less articulate. Lila felt Ethan tense beside her, but she kept smiling. Well, I'm not most girlfriends. I'm an architect, actually. I design spaces that make people feel at home, and now you've found your home with Ethan. Lila looked at Ethan, who was watching her with an expression of genuine curiosity. For a moment, she almost forgot they were acting. He's unexpected, she said softly. I thought I knew what I wanted in life. And then Ethan literally crashed into my world and rearranged everything. Literally crashed. Olivia leaned forward. MoMA. Ethan jumped in smoothly. I was rushing to a meeting, completely distracted by a phone call about a hotel acquisition in Tokyo. Lila was carrying her portfolio to show a client, and he looked at Lila with what appeared to be genuine fondness. I knocked her flat on her back and scattered her life's work all over the modern art wing. And your first thought was? Olivia asked Lila. That this incredibly rude man in an expensive suit was about to ruin my entire career. Lila laughed. I may have used some colorful language. She called me an overprivileged disaster in Italian leather shoes. Ethan grinned. It was the most honest thing anyone had said to me in years. Lila blinked. He was actually good at this improvisation thing. So Ethan asked you to dinner to apologize. Actually, Lila said. Getting into the rhythm. I demanded he pay for reprinting my entire portfolio, Ethan countered, with dinner at Le Bernardin and a promise to personally deliver the reprints to my client. And did he? Ethan and Lila looked at each other. There was a pause that lasted just a beat too long. He showed up at my client meeting the next morning, Lila said finally, in the same expensive suit, carrying a perfect reproduction of my portfolio and a single white orchid. Why an orchid? The photographer asked, snapping pictures as they talked. Because, Ethan said, and Lila could hear the smile in his voice. Lila told me that most men bring roses because it's easy. She said, orchids require actual thought and care to keep alive, like relationships. Olivia was typing furiously on her tablet. This is wonderful. So romantic. And the proposal? How did that happen? Lila felt her stomach drop. They hadn't discussed this part. It was, she started, then looked helplessly at Ethan. Last night, Ethan said smoothly, reaching into his robe pocket, which is why Lila's here so early. I couldn't sleep after asking, and she couldn't sleep after saying yes. He pulled out a small velvet box that Lila was absolutely certain hadn't been there 5 minutes ago. Ethan, Lila whispered, staring at the box. I was going to wait until tonight. Make it more formal, he said, getting down on one knee right there in front of the reporters. But Lila Martinez, you've already said yes once in private. Will you say yes again, officially? Lila looked down at Ethan, kneeling on the marble floor, holding a ring box with 2 reporters documenting every second. His blue eyes were sparkling with something that looked almost like genuine nervousness. This was either the most romantic thing that had ever happened to her or the most elaborate scam in Manhattan history, possibly both. Yes, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Yes, Ethan. Of course it's yes. The ring slid onto her finger perfectly. Lila stared at it. A classic solitaire that caught the morning light coming through the floor to ceiling windows and threw tiny rainbows across the walls. How did you? She started to ask. But Ethan stood up and kissed her cheek, whispering in her ear, emergency ring. All hotel heirs keep one. I'll explain later. Olivia was practically vibrating with excitement. This is incredible. Our readers are going to love this story. A real modern fairy tale. The photographer was snapping pictures rapidly. Can we get some shots of you two on the balcony? The morning light is perfect. As they moved toward the windows, Lila caught sight of her reflection in the glass. She was wearing yesterday's clothes. Her hair was a disaster, and she was engaged to a man she'd met 20 minutes ago. She looked absolutely radiant. Lila, Ethan murmured as they posed for photos. Where exactly is your important presentation this morning? Stonewell Architecture. Firm downtown. Why? Ethan smiled. The same smile that was probably closing million-dollar deals every day. Because the head of Stonewell Architecture is my godfather. And he's going to love hearing about how his most promising potential contractor is now part of the Sterling family. Lila stared at him. You're joking. I never joke about business, sweetheart. The endearment rolled off his tongue so naturally that Lila almost believed he meant it. Olivia finished her notes and handed Lila an elegant business card. Lila, I'd love to do a follow-up piece about your architectural work. Our lifestyle section is always looking for talented women making their mark in male-dominated industries. That would be. Lila looked at the card. Heavy stock, embossed lettering, Financial Times logo. That would be incredible. After the reporters left, Lila and Ethan stood in the suddenly quiet room, still holding hands, both staring at the ring on her finger. So, Lila said finally, emergency ring. Every Sterling male gets one when they turn 25. Family tradition. Ethan loosened his tie. My grandfather started it after he proposed to my grandmother with a twist tie from a bread bag. That's actually sweet. The Sterlings are full of surprises. Ethan picked up a leather portfolio from his desk and handed it to her. Speaking of which, this is your new contract with Sterling Hotels. We're hiring you to redesign the lobbies of our 3 Manhattan properties. Lila opened the folder, and her eyes widened. The fee listed at the bottom was more than she'd made in the past 2 years combined. Ethan, this is business. You're talented. We need fresh design perspective. And now your family. It works out for everyone. Lila looked at the contract, then at the ring, then at Ethan, who was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Are you always this prepared for chaos? Lila, Ethan said, straightening his tie again. I'm a Sterling. We don't just handle chaos. We choreograph it. Lila stood in front of the Stonewell Architecture firm building at 845 A.M. wearing a borrowed designer dress from Ethan's sister's emergency wardrobe. Apparently, the Sterling family was prepared for everything, holding her restructured portfolio and sporting an engagement ring worth more than her college education. "This is insane," she muttered to herself. Checking her reflection in the glass doors, her phone buzzed with a text from Ethan. "Remember, you're brilliant, talented, and now you have the best references in Manhattan. Also, Uncle Robert loves efficiency and hates small talk. Go straight to the point." Lila typed back. "Uncle Robert, Godfather?" "Uncle Robert, long story." "You've got this, architecture queen." Lila almost smiled despite her nerves. The Stonewell lobby was everything Lila had expected from Manhattan's most prestigious architecture firm. Sleek marble, impossibly high ceilings, and furniture that looked like it belonged in a modern art museum. The receptionist, a woman with silver hair and sharp eyes, looked up as Lila approached. "Lila Martinez, here for the 9A. M. Presentation with Mr. Stonewell." "Ah, yes, Miss Martinez." The receptionist's expression shifted from polite to intrigued. "Congratulations, by the way. The announcement this morning was quite exciting." Lila blinked. "Announcement?" "The Financial Times article went live an hour ago. Hotel Empire Air finds love with rising architect. It's quite romantic, really." Lila's phone buzzed again. "Ethan, article is trending. Uncle Robert has probably seen it. Use it to your advantage." "Great. No pressure at all. Mr. Stonewell will see you now," the receptionist said, gesturing toward a corner office with glass walls and a view that probably cost more per square foot than most people's entire apartments. Robert Stonewell was exactly what Lila had imagined. Silver-haired, impeccably dressed, and radiating the kind of confidence that came from 30 years of designing Manhattan's skyline. He looked up from his tablet as she entered, and Lila caught the moment his expression shifted from professional courtesy to genuine interest. "Ms. Martinez," he said, standing and extending his hand, or should I say, future Mrs. Sterling. Lila felt heat rise in her cheeks. "Lila is fine. Mr. Stonewell, thank you for this opportunity. Please, call me Robert, and congratulations. Ethan mentioned you were talented, but he failed to mention you were family." He gestured to a chair across from his desk. "I assume that's why you're here a bit differently dressed than expected." Lila looked down at the elegant navy dress that fit her perfectly. "It's been an eventful morning, I imagine." "So, the Financial Times piece was quite charming." "So, you design spaces that make people feel at home." "That's my philosophy." "Yes." Lila opened her portfolio, grateful to be on familiar ground. "I believe architecture should serve the people who inhabit it, not the other way around." "Interesting. Show me." For the next 20 minutes, Lila walked Robert through her designs. A community center in Chicago that had revitalized a struggling neighborhood, a small office building that increased productivity by 30% through strategic natural light placement, and her crown jewel, a low-income housing project that had won 3 design awards while staying under budget. "This is impressive work," Robert said, studying her drawings. "Creative solutions, practical implementation, and clear results. Very Sterling-like." "Actually, Sterling-like?" "The family has a gift for seeing potential where others see problems. Ethan redesigned our hotel lobby efficiency systems and increased customer satisfaction by 40%. Robert leaned back in his chair. "Which brings me to why you're really here." Lila's stomach dropped. "Sir, the Avalon Resort project. We've been struggling with it for 6 months. High-end resort in the Hamptons. But the client wants luxury that doesn't feel pretentious. They want elegance that feels like home." He pulled out a thick folder. "Every designer we've brought in has given us the same cookie-cutter luxury approach. But your work," he tapped her portfolio. "You understand the balance." Lila stared at the folder. Through the transparent cover, she could see architectural plans, budget sheets, and what looked like a very large number with many zeros. "This is a 2-year project, Lila. Lead designer position. It would establish you as one of Manhattan's premier residential architects." Robert posed. "Of course, your connection to the Sterling family doesn't hurt. They're investors in the project." "They are?" Ethan didn't mention that. "Interesting." Robert's eyes twinkled with something that might have been amusement. "The Sterlings have been silent partners in Avalon from the beginning. Ethan actually recommended we consider you for the position last week. Before this morning's news." Lila felt like she was in an elevator that had suddenly dropped 3 floors. "He recommended me before this morning? Called me Tuesday night." actually. Said he'd heard about a brilliant architect from Chicago who was looking for New York opportunities. Sent me your portfolio electronically. Robert opened his desk drawer and pulled out printed copies of her work. I was planning to offer you a junior position today, but given this morning's developments and seeing your work in person, Lila's phone buzzed. Without thinking, she glanced at it. Ethan, how's it going? Uncle Robert texted that you're brilliant. Told you so. Everything all right? Robert asked. Yes. Lila looked at the message, then at Robert, then at the contract folder on the desk. Mr. Stonewell Robert, can I ask you something? Of course. How long have you known Ethan? Since he was 8 years old. I'm not technically his godfather. That's just what the family calls me. I was his father's college roommate and business partner before I started Stonewell. Why? Lila took a deep breath. Is he always this orchestrative? Robert laughed, a genuine sound that filled the glass office. Lila, Ethan Sterling doesn't do anything without a plan. The fact that he recommended you before you two were engaged tells me one of two things. Either he's been watching your work for longer than you realize, or he's the most romantic strategist I've ever met. Which do you think it is? Knowing Ethan? Probably both. Robert slid the contract folder across the desk. This is yours if you want it. Not because you're marrying into the Sterling family, but because you're exactly what this project needs. The engagement just makes the client meetings more interesting. Lila opened the folder and saw the salary figure. She had to read it 3 times to make sure she was seeing the right number of zeros. This is standard rate for a lead designer on a project this size, plus benefits, plus a completion bonus. Robert pointed to another number, quite substantial. Lila's phone buzzed again. This time it was a call from Ethan. Take it, Robert said. I'll give you privacy to discuss with your fiancé. Lila stepped into the hallway and answered, How did it go? Ethan's voice was warm with genuine concern. Ethan, did you recommend me for this job before we met? There was a pause. Define met. Don't be clever. Did you know who I was before this morning? Another pause. Longer this time. Lila, can we discuss this tonight over dinner? Somewhere private where I can explain properly. Ethan, yes, I knew who you were. No, this morning wasn't planned. Yes, I think you're incredibly talented. And yes, I may have been looking for an excuse to meet you for the past month. Lila leaned against the hallway wall, staring at her engagement ring. You've been stalking me. I've been admiring your work from a professional distance. There's a difference, is there? Lila, take the job. You earned it. We'll figure out the rest over dinner. His voice softened. Trust me. Lila looked through the glass wall at Robert, who was politely pretending not to watch her conversation. One dinner. You explain everything. Deal. Le Benedina Ut, the place where you supposedly took me on our first date. I figured we should make at least one part of our story true. Despite everything, Lila smiled. You're impossible, but charming. Jury's still out. Lila hung up and walked back into Robert's office. He looked up expectantly. I'll take the job, she said, reaching for a pen. But I have one condition. Name it. If this doesn't work out the engagement, I want your word that my position here isn't affected. Robert smiled and extended his hand for a shake. Lila, in my 30 years in this business, I've learned that talent speaks for itself. Sterling or not, you're exactly what we need. As Lila signed the contract, she caught sight of her reflection in the office window. She looked professional, confident, and successful. She also looked like someone who was in way over her head. But for the first time in months, that felt like a good thing. Robert handed her a sleek business card holder, along with the signed contract. Welcome to Stonewell Architecture. Lead designer Martinez. Your first client meeting is Thursday at 10. I'll email you the details. Thursday. That's the day after tomorrow. The Hamptons project moves fast. I hope you're ready for the intensity. Lila looked at the contract in her hands, the ring on her finger, and the business card that had her name printed in elegant script. Lila Martinez, lead designer, Stonewell Architecture, ready as I'll ever be. Le Bernardin was exactly as elegant as Lila had imagined when they created their fake first date story that morning. Crystal chandeliers, pristine white tablecloths, and an atmosphere that whispered romance in several different languages. Lila arrived 5 minutes early, wearing another borrowed dress from the mysterious Sterling family emergency wardrobe. This one, a deep emerald that made her feel like she belonged in a place where the wine list cost more than her monthly rent. Ethan was already there, seated at a corner table with perfect lighting and a view of the Manhattan skyline. He stood as she approached, and Lila was struck again by how unfairly handsome he looked in a simple navy suit. You clean up nice for someone who's had the most chaotic day in Manhattan history, he said, pulling out her chair. You should see me on a normal day. I'm practically a supermodel. Lila sat down, immediately noticing the wine glass already filled with something that sparkled. Champagne. Are we celebrating, or are you trying to get me drunk before you explain how you've been professionally stalking me? Celebrating your new job. The stalking explanation comes with the appetizers. Lila lifted her glass. To the most bizarre Tuesday of my entire life. To Tuesday, Ethan agreed, clinking his glass against hers. And to the fact that you haven't run screaming yet, the day is young. They ordered. Lila chose the lobster because if she was going to have her life turned upside down, she might as well eat like royalty while it happened. Ethan went with the salmon and spent an unusual amount of time studying the wine list. Nervous? Lila asked. Terrified, Ethan admitted. I've never had to explain to my fake fiancée how I became interested in her before we fake met. That is a very specific social situation. The Sterling family specializes in specific social situations. Their appetizers arrived, something delicate and French that Lila was certain cost more than her weekly grocery budget. She took a bite and decided that if this was her last meal before Ethan revealed he was actually a serial killer, at least it would be memorable. Okay, she said, setting down her fork. Explain. And start from the beginning. Ethan took a deep breath. 3 months ago, my father decided I needed to get married. Subtle. About as subtle as a billboard in Times Square. He's been introducing me to what he calls suitable candidates. Daughters of business partners, socialites. Women whose main qualification is that they look good at charity galas. Sounds awful. It was, until Robert mentioned this brilliant architect from Chicago who was looking to break into the Manhattan market. He'd seen your portfolio through a mutual contact and was impressed. Lila raised an eyebrow. Continue. So, I looked up your work. Ethan pulled out his phone and showed her a screenshot of her company website. Lila, your designs are incredible. That community center you did, I spent an hour reading about it. You increased property values in the surrounding area by 20% while creating a space that actually serves the community. You researched my community impact. I research everything that interests me. It's a character flaw. Ethan took a sip of wine. Then I saw your interview with Architecture Weekly about sustainable luxury design. And you what? Ethan looked slightly embarrassed. I may have watched it 17 times. Lila blinked. 17? You have this way of explaining complex concepts that makes them sound like poetry. And when you talked about designing spaces that honor both beauty and functionality, Ethan shrugged. I thought you might be the most interesting person I'd ever met. So, you decided to what? Engineer a meeting? I asked Robert to consider you for projects. I may have mentioned that Sterling Hotels was looking for fresh design perspective. I possibly suggested that you might be perfect for some upcoming collaborations. Lila set down her champagne glass. Ethan, that's manipulative. Probably, but I never planned for you to end up in my bed. That was just the universe having a sense of humor, or the universe setting us up. Maybe. Ethan leaned forward. Lila, I want you to understand something. Everything that happened today, the job offer, the contract, the opportunity you earned, that Robert doesn't hire people as favors, even for me. Your talent got you that position. But your recommendation got me in the door. My recommendation got you a meeting. Your portfolio got you the job. Lila considered this, twirling her engagement ring around her finger. It had become a nervous habit in the past 12 hours. What about this morning? The engagement announcement. Complete panic. My father saw you leaving the penthouse elevator and jumped to conclusions. When he told me he'd already called Forbes, Ethan ran his hand through his hair. I had about 30 seconds to decide between public humiliation and playing along. And you chose playing along. I chose you. The words hung in the air between them. Lila felt something flutter in her chest that had nothing to do with the champagne. Ethan, I know it's crazy. I know we've known each other for less than 24 hours. But Lila, in that hotel room this morning, when you were organizing my desk and leaving post-it notes with design suggestions, he smiled. I thought maybe the universe was finally making sense. Their main courses arrived, giving Lila a moment to process. The lobster was perfect, but she barely tasted it. Her mind was spinning with everything Ethan had told her. So, what happens now? She asked finally. Now we figure out how to make this work. The engagement. 6 months minimum to satisfy my father's investors and your career launch. After that, Ethan paused. After that, we see what happens. And if nothing happens, then we stage the world's most amicable breakup. You keep your job and your connections, and I go back to dodging my father's matchmaking attempts." Lila looked at Ethan across the candlelit table. He was watching her with an expression of hopeful uncertainty that made him seem younger and more vulnerable than the confident businessman from this morning. "What are the rules?" she asked. "Rules for the next 6 months. What are we to each other? What are the boundaries?" Ethan pulled out a small leather notebook and a pen. "Let's figure it out together." For the next hour, over dessert and coffee, they created what Lila privately thought of as the most romantic business contract in Manhattan history. Written in Ethan's neat handwriting across several pages of hotel stationery, the Ethan and Lila fake engagement agreement. Public appearances always present as committed couple. Living arrangements: Lila keeps her Chicago apartment, stays in NYC penthouse as needed. Business separation: Lila's career decisions remain independent. Family events: both attend as supportive partners. Media interaction: all interviews coordinated together. Personal space: respect individual privacy and boundaries. Exit strategy: mutual agreement required for engagement termination. Real feelings clause: if genuine romantic feelings develop, immediate honest discussion required. Real feelings clause. Lila read aloud. "Insurance policy," Ethan said, "in case this fake relationship becomes less fake." Lila looked at the document, then at Ethan, then at her engagement ring, catching the candlelight. "This is either the most practical thing I've ever done, or the most insane. Can it be both?" Lila signed her name at the bottom of the page, with a flourish. Lila Martinez. Fake fiancé and real architect. Ethan signed below her signature. Ethan Sterling, grateful fake fiancé and professional romantic strategist. As they left the restaurant, Ethan offered her his arm. "So, fake fiancé, what would you like to do for the rest of our first official evening together?" Lila looked up at the Manhattan skyline, sparkling with possibilities. "Show me your city, Ethan. If I'm going to be a Sterling for 6 months, I should probably learn to love New York the way you do." Ethan smiled, the first completely unguarded expression she'd seen from him all day. "Lila Martinez, that might be the best fake first date request I've ever received. How many fake first dates have you been on?" "You're my first. I'm new to this whole fake romance thing." As they walked down the street, Lila realized that somewhere between the morning chaos and the evening confessions, she'd stopped thinking about this as a business arrangement, which, according to their contract, meant she owed Ethan an honest discussion. But that conversation could wait until tomorrow. Tonight, she just wanted to see Manhattan through the eyes of someone who might be falling in love with her, even if he didn't know it yet. Lila woke up for the second time in the Sterling penthouse. But this morning felt entirely different. For starters, she was alone in the massive guest bedroom, wearing silk pajamas that probably cost more than her monthly coffee budget, and she could smell actual breakfast cooking, instead of the protein bars she usually grabbed on her way out the door. She padded to the kitchen in borrowed slippers and found Ethan standing at a professional-grade stove, wearing jeans and an MIT t-shirt, flipping what appeared to be perfect pancakes, while simultaneously reading emails on his phone and conducting a conference call through wireless earbuds. "No, Lucas. I specifically said the Tokyo acquisition should wait until after the third quarter reports," he was saying while expertly sliding a pancake onto a plate. He glanced up and saw Lila, gesturing to the coffee maker with a smile that was becoming dangerously familiar. Lila poured herself coffee from what was undoubtedly the most expensive machine she'd ever encountered and settled at the breakfast bar to watch Ethan orchestrate what appeared to be a hostile takeover while making breakfast like he was hosting a cooking show. "Because, Lucas, if we move too fast on the Tokyo deal, the board will think we're overextending, and my father will use that as ammunition for his Ethan needs adult supervision campaign." Ethan flipped another pancake with unnecessary flair. "Yes, I'm aware that I'm 29, not 12. Lila sipped her coffee, which was predictably the best coffee she'd ever tasted, and tried not to stare at how Ethan's t-shirt fit across his shoulders. It was becoming increasingly difficult to remember that this was a business arrangement when her fake fiancé looked like he'd stepped out of a magazine spread titled "Billionaires Who Cook." "Lila," Ethan said, covering his phone, "how do you feel about blueberry pancakes and attending a charity gala tomorrow night?" "I feel like those two things are completely unrelated, but I'm in favor of both." "Perfect. Lucas, I have to go. My fiancé needs pancakes, and that takes priority over your quarterly projections." Ethan hung up and turned his full attention to Lila. "Good morning, fake future wife. How did you sleep in the Sterling family guest suite?" Like I was floating on a cloud made of Egyptian cotton and good life choices. Lila accepted the plate of pancakes he offered her. These smell incredible. Do all hoteliers cook, or are you just showing off? Showing off, Ethan admitted cheerfully. I took cooking classes in college because I figured women would find it attractive. Did it work? You tell me? Ethan sat down across from her with his own plate. You're the first woman I've ever made breakfast for in this kitchen. Lila paused with her fork halfway to her mouth. Really? Really? I usually eat breakfast at the office or grab something from the hotel restaurant downstairs. But when I woke up and knew you were here, Ethan shrugged. I wanted to make you pancakes. The pancakes were, of course, perfect. Lila was beginning to suspect that Ethan Sterling didn't do anything halfway. About the charity gala, Ethan said, cutting into his own breakfast. It's the Metropolitan Museum's annual fundraiser, very fancy. Very public. And my parents will be there. Your parents? Lila nearly choked on her coffee. As in the people who think we're actually engaged? The very ones. My mother is particularly excited to meet you. She's been texting me since 6 a.m. with questions about your dress size, dietary restrictions, and whether you prefer roses or orchids for corsages. Lila stared at him. Corsages? What is this, prom? Welcome to Margaret Sterling's world, where every event is an opportunity for floral arrangements and strategic social networking. Ethan showed her his phone, which was indeed filled with texts from someone labeled Mom, Hotel Queen. She's already planned your introduction to half of Manhattan's social elite. Ethan, I don't know how to be a socialite. I'm an architect from Chicago. Yesterday, my biggest social event was happy hour at TGI Fridays. First of all, there's nothing wrong with TGI Fridays. Second, you don't need to be a socialite, you just need to be yourself. Smart, talented, and charming. The rest is just expensive clothes and remembering people's names. Easy for you to say. You were born into this world. Ethan set down his fork and looked at her seriously. Lila, I've watched you convince a Financial Times reporter that we've been in love for 6 months, negotiate a major contract with one of Manhattan's most demanding architects, and create a fake relationship agreement that's more thoughtful than most real marriages. You can handle one charity gala. Lila felt a flutter of warmth at his confidence in her. What if I say something wrong? What if I use the wrong fork, or don't know the difference between a duchess and a countess? Then you'll be authentically American, which is refreshing at these events. Besides, Ethan grinned, if anyone gives you trouble, I'll just buy their hotel and fire them. That's a terrible abuse of power, but effective. Lila's phone buzzed with a text from her best friend Emma in Chicago. Girl, you're trending on Twitter. Sterling engagement is everywhere. Call me immediately. Uh-oh, Lila said, showing Ethan the message. Ethan pulled out his own phone and quickly typed something. Just sent you the contact for our family's PR manager. She'll brief you on what to say if anyone calls. Basic rule. You're happy, you're in love, and you have no comment on wedding plans because you're focusing on your career right now. We have a PR manager. We have 3 PR managers, 2 social media coordinators, and a crisis management team. The Sterling family takes public image very seriously. Lila shook her head in amazement. Is there anything you people aren't prepared for? Alien invasion? Dad's still working on that contingency plan. After breakfast, Ethan disappeared into his home office for a meeting about the Tokyo hotel acquisition, leaving Lila to explore the penthouse and try to wrap her head around her new temporary reality. The apartment was stunning. Floor-to-ceiling windows, modern art that probably belonged in museums, and a kitchen that could service a small restaurant. But what struck her most were the personal touches, family photos showing Ethan at various ages with his parents and sister, bookshelves filled with everything from business journals to fantasy novels, and a corner of the living room that was clearly his relaxation space, complete with a worn leather chair and a guitar. Lila was examining a framed photo of teenage Ethan in what appeared to be a high school theater production when her phone rang. Lila Martinez, social media sensation. Emma's voice came through immediately. Start talking. Hi, Emma. How's Chicago? Don't hi, Emma me. You disappeared yesterday for a business meeting, and suddenly you're engaged to a hotel empire heir. The internet is going crazy. There are conspiracy theories about whether you're pregnant, whether this is a green card situation, and whether Ethan Sterling is actually gay and you're his beard. He's definitely not gay, Lila said automatically, then caught herself. I mean, it's complicated. Complicated. How? Lila, did you seriously get engaged to a stranger? Lila walked to the windows and looked out at Manhattan, trying to figure out how to explain the situation without actually explaining anything. Emma, what if I told you that sometimes the universe puts you exactly where you need to be, even if it doesn't make sense at the time? I'd say you've been hit by a very attractive, very rich truck. And you're experiencing some kind of luxury-induced Stockholm syndrome. That's not entirely inaccurate. Lila Elizabeth Martinez, are you happy? Lila considered the question. 24 hours ago, she'd been panicking about her failing business and her uncertain future. Now, she had a job she'd dreamed of, a fake fiancé who made her pancakes and believed in her talent, and a 6-month adventure in Manhattan that could change her entire life. Yeah, she said finally. I think I actually am. Then I'm happy for you. But if this Ethan guy hurts you... I'm driving to New York with a baseball bat and my cousin Tony. Your cousin Tony is an accountant. He's a very intimidating accountant. After Emma hung up, Lila spent the rest of the morning working on preliminary sketches for the Avalon Resort project. She'd set up a makeshift workspace in Ethan's dining room, spreading architectural plans and design magazines across the mahogany table that could easily seat 12 people. She was deep in calculations about sustainable building materials when Ethan appeared with 2 cups of coffee and a concerned expression. You've been working for 3 hours straight, he said, setting a cup next to her elbow. Are you always this focused? When I'm excited about a project, yes. This resort design is incredible, Ethan. The client wants luxury that feels like home, but the location is right on the beach. I'm thinking natural materials, sustainable energy systems, and sightlines that make every room feel connected to the ocean. Ethan sat down next to her and studied her sketches. These are beautiful. You work in pencil first. Always. There's something about the physical connection between hand, pencil, and paper that helps me think through spatial relationships. Lila realized she was rambling and looked up to find Ethan watching her with an expression of genuine fascination. Sorry, I get carried away when I talk about architecture. Don't apologize. It's incredible watching you work. You get this look of complete concentration, like you're solving the mysteries of the universe, one building at a time. Lila felt heat rise in her cheeks. It's just work. No, it's not. It's passion. There's a difference. Ethan pointed to one of her sketches. What's this? A central courtyard with a living wall, plants native to Long Island that would provide natural cooling and create a sense of place. Guests would walk through it on their way to their rooms, so it becomes part of the experience rather than just decoration. Brilliant. Cost-effective, too. Natural cooling means lower energy bills. Lila blinked. You understood the sustainable design implications immediately. I told you, I research everything that interests me. I may have spent last night reading about biophilic design principles and passive cooling systems. You researched architecture theory for me, for us. I want to understand your work, Lila. If we're going to be partners, even fake partners, I should know what makes you excited about getting up in the morning. The word partners hung in the air between them, and Lila felt something shift in her chest. Ethan wasn't just playing a role. He was genuinely interested in her world. Ethan, she said carefully, when this 6 months is over, what happens to this? She gestured between them. I don't know, he admitted, but I'd like to find out. Lila's phone buzzed with a reminder. Client meeting. Avalon Resort. 2 p.m. Speaking of finding out, Lila said, gathering her sketches, I need to get ready for my first meeting as lead designer Martinez. Want some company? I could introduce you to the client. They're old family friends. You know them personally, Lila. In Manhattan, everyone knows everyone. It's a very small island for very wealthy people. An hour later, Lila found herself in the back of a town car with Ethan, heading toward the Hamptons for her first major client meeting. She was wearing yet another borrowed outfit. This time, a sophisticated black blazer and dress combination that made her feel like she could negotiate international treaties, and carrying a leather portfolio that Ethan had produced from what he called the family emergency professional supplies closet. Does your family have emergency supplies for everything? Lila asked. Pretty much. Emergency formal wear, emergency legal documents, emergency jewelry, emergency transportation, emergency fake fiancés. Ethan grinned. You're our first emergency fake fiancé. We're breaking new ground here. The Avalon Resort client turned out to be Catherine Prescott, a woman in her 60s with silver hair, impeccable style, and the kind of presence that suggested she'd been making important decisions since before Lila was born. She greeted Ethan with genuine affection and studied Lila with intelligent, assessing eyes. So, You're the architect who's captured our Ethan's heart and stolen Robert Stonewell's most prestigious project, Catherine said, leading them through the construction site. I'm impressed on both counts. Thank you, Mrs. Prescott. I'm excited about the opportunity to create something special here. Tell me what you see when you look at this space. Lila walked to the edge of the bluff where the resort would be built, looking out over the ocean and back toward the rolling hills of Long Island. The wind was perfect, the light was extraordinary, and she could envision exactly how the building should flow with the natural landscape. I see a place where luxury doesn't fight with nature. It partners with it, Lila said. Guests should feel like they're staying in the most beautiful private home on the coast, not in a hotel that happens to be near the beach. Catherine nodded approvingly. Go on. For the next hour, Lila walked Catherine through her vision. Buildings that followed the natural contours of the land, materials sourced from local suppliers, energy systems that worked with coastal winds and solar patterns, and interior spaces that could be completely open to bring the outside in. The goal isn't to impose a building on this site, Lila explained, sketching quickly in her notebook. It's to let the site tell us where the building wants to be. Ethan, Catherine said, you didn't tell me your fiancé was a poet. I'm discovering new things about her every day, Ethan replied. And Lila was surprised by how genuine he sounded. By the time they left the Hamptons, Lila had signed approval for her preliminary designs, a timeline for the next phase of development, and a commission that would establish her as one of New York's premier resort designers. That was incredible, she said as they drove back toward Manhattan. Mrs. Prescott actually understood the sustainable luxury concept immediately. Catherine's been in the hospitality business for 40 years. She recognizes talent when she sees it. Ethan was looking at Lila with something that might have been pride. You were brilliant in there. Thank you for introducing me and for understanding what I was trying to do with the design. Lila, can I ask you something? Of course, when this project is finished, when you're established in Manhattan, when you don't need the Sterling connection anymore, Ethan paused. Will you stay? Lila looked out the window at the Manhattan skyline appearing in the distance. You mean stay in New York? I mean, stay with me. For real this time. The question hung between them as they drove through the tunnel back into the city. Lila realized that somewhere between the pancakes and the client meeting, between Ethan researching architecture theory and watching her work with genuine fascination, she'd stopped thinking about their relationship as entirely fake. Ethan, she said finally, ask me again in 5 months and 29 days. Is that a maybe? Lila smiled, looking at her engagement ring sparkling in the late afternoon sun. That's a very strong maybe. As they pulled up to the hotel, Ethan's phone buzzed with a text from his mother. Darling, I've arranged for Lila's dress fitting tomorrow at 10 a.m. Tell her to ask for Elise at Bergdorf's. She's expecting her. Also, I've invited the Morgans to dinner Sunday so they can meet Lila properly. Love you both. Your mother works fast, Lila said, reading over his shoulder. You have no idea. By Sunday, she'll have planned our entire fake wedding and selected names for our hypothetical children. Should I be terrified? Ethan helped her out of the car and looked at her seriously. Lila, my family can be a lot. They're well-meaning, but they're also intense, demanding, and completely invested in this relationship being real. If you want to back out, Lila looked up at the Sterling Hotel with its elegant facade and discreet luxury, then at Ethan, who was watching her with hopeful uncertainty. Ethan Sterling, she said, straightening his tie with a gesture that was becoming natural. I signed a contract. I don't back out of contracts, even when the job requirements keep expanding. Especially then, that's when things get interesting. As they walked into the hotel lobby together, Lila realized that she was looking forward to meeting Ethan's parents, to the charity gala, to Sunday dinner with family friends she'd never met. She was looking forward to being part of Ethan's world, even if it was temporary, which, according to their contract, meant she owed him an honest discussion about developing real feelings, but that conversation could wait until after she survived being introduced to Manhattan society as the future Mrs. Sterling. How hard could it be? Lila stared at herself in the floor-to-ceiling mirror of the Bergdorf Goodman fitting room and wondered if it was possible to die from elegance overdose. The gown that Elise, Margaret Sterling's personal stylist, had selected was a masterpiece of midnight blue silk that somehow made Lila look like she'd been born to attend charity galas. Instead of crawling around construction sites with a hard hat, darling, you look absolutely divine, Elise said. adjusting the dress's delicate beading with the precision of a surgeon. "Mister, Ethan is going to forget how to breathe when he sees you." "That's the idea," Lila muttered, though she wasn't entirely sure if she was talking about their public performance or something much more personal. It had been 3 days since the Hamptons client meeting, 3 days of living in Ethan's penthouse, and gradually falling into a domestic routine that felt dangerously natural. Ethan made coffee every morning while reviewing international market reports. Lila worked on the Avalon resort designs while he handled conference calls. They ordered dinner from different restaurants each night and debated everything from sustainable architecture to whether pineapple belonged on pizza. Lila was team pineapple. Ethan was team absolutely not. That's chaos. It was the most comfortable fake relationship Lila had ever been in, which was problematic considering it was also the only fake relationship she'd ever been in. "Now for accessories," Elise continued, opening a jewelry case that contained enough diamonds to fund a small country's infrastructure projects. "Mrs. Sterling suggested the sapphire set, but I think these emeralds complement your coloring beautifully." Lila looked at the emerald necklace and earrings that Elise was holding up. They were stunning, elegant, and probably worth more than her parents' house in Chicago. "Are these real?" Lila asked weakly. "Darling, this is Bergdorf's. Everything is real, except the relationships of half our clientele." Lila's phone buzzed with a text from Ethan. "How's the dress shopping going? Mom wants to know if you need anything else. Also, I may have told her you're excited to meet Dad tonight. I hope that's not entirely false." Lila typed back, "Your mother has excellent taste, and I'm only mildly terrified to meet your father. He's going to love you. You're smart, talented, and you can hold your own in a conversation about architectural sustainability. Dad's secretly fascinated by green building design." "How do you know that?" "Because I pay attention to things that matter to people I care about." Lila stared at the message for a long moment. 3 days ago, Ethan had been a stranger who'd accidentally become her fake fiancé. Now he was someone who researched her interests, encouraged her career, and sent texts that made her heart do complicated gymnastics routines. This was becoming a problem. "Ms. Martinez." Elise's voice brought Lila back to reality. "Shall I have these pieces sent to the hotel, or would you prefer to wear them tonight?" "Tonight, please. If I'm going to pretend to be Manhattan royalty, I might as well do it properly." 2 hours later, Lila was back in the penthouse, trying to calm her nerves by working on architectural drawings while wearing yoga pants and a t-shirt that said, "I'm not arguing, I'm explaining why I'm right." A gift from Emma that seemed increasingly appropriate for her new life. Ethan emerged from his bedroom wearing a perfectly tailored tuxedo that made him look like he should be on the cover of a magazine called Men Who Could Ruin Your Life in the Best Possible Way. "Lila," he said, then stopped talking and just stared at her. I know. I need to start getting ready. The dress is hanging in the guest room, and your mother's jewelry person delivered enough emeralds to fund a small army. You're wearing the t-shirt Emma sent you," Ethan said, sitting down across from her at the dining table where she'd spread her work. "Yes, is that a problem?" "It's perfect. You're perfect." Ethan looked at her architectural sketches. "You've been working on the resort design all afternoon. I wanted to have something concrete to show MrsX's.com. Prescott when she calls Monday. I think I've figured out how to integrate the sustainable cooling system with the aesthetic design elements." Ethan picked up one of her drawings, a detailed cross-section showing how natural airflow would work with the building's orientation. "Lila, this is incredible. You've solved the energy efficiency problem without compromising the luxury experience. You can read architectural drawings now. I've been learning. There are some excellent online courses from MIT. Ethan set down the drawing and looked at her. "Seriously, Lila, we need to talk." Lila's stomach dropped. "That sounds ominous." "It's not ominous. It's just important." Ethan reached across the table and took her hands. "Tonight, you're going to meet my parents, my extended family, and about 300 of Manhattan's most prominent citizens. They're all going to assume we're madly in love and planning a real future together, right? That's what we agreed on. But Lila, I need you to know that when I look at you tonight, when I introduce you as my fiancé, when I tell people how happy I am." Ethan paused. "I won't be acting." Lila felt her heart stop, restart, then begin beating in a rhythm that could probably power a small generator. "Ethan, I know we have a contract. I know we agreed to discuss it if real feelings develop. I know this is complicated and crazy and probably the worst timing in the history of romantic timing." Ethan squeezed her hands. "But Lila, I'm falling for you. Actually falling. The real kind that involves wanting to make you pancakes every morning for the next 50 years. Lila stared at him. 50 years of pancakes at minimum. I'm also falling for the way you reorganize everything in your sleep, and how you get excited about sustainable building materials, and how you wear t-shirts with attitude while designing spaces that could change people's lives. This is really bad timing, Lila said weakly. The worst. We've known each other for less than a week. 5 days, 14 hours, and approximately 23 minutes. You're counting? I've been counting since you fell off my bed and called me an overprivileged disaster. Lila looked down at their joined hands, then back up at Ethan's face. He was watching her with the same expression he'd worn when he proposed in front of the Financial Times reporter. Hopeful, nervous, and completely sincere. Ethan, what if this doesn't work? What if we're just caught up in the romance of the situation? What if in 6 months we realize we're completely wrong for each other? Then we'll figure it out together. But Lila, what if we don't? What if this is actually the universe finally making sense? Lila felt tears prick at her eyes. You're supposed to be the practical businessman who thinks everything through. I am thinking this through. I've thought about nothing else for 3 days. Lila Martinez, you make me want to be the kind of man who deserves to wake up next to someone as incredible as you. Ethan, I love the way you approach problems like puzzles to be solved. I love that you care about creating spaces that serve people, not just impress them. I love that you're not impressed by wealth or status. You're impressed by integrity and creativity and kindness. Lila wiped at her eyes, probably smearing her mascara. This is going to ruin my makeup. We have 2 hours before we need to leave. Plenty of time to fix whatever damage I cause by telling you that I love you. The words hung in the air between them. Lila felt like she was standing on the edge of a very high cliff, looking down at water that could either be refreshingly perfect or devastatingly cold. You love me? I love you, Lila Martinez. I love your brain, your heart, your terrible t-shirt collection, and the way you make me want to be better at everything. Ethan stood up and pulled her to her feet. And if you'll let me, I'd like to spend the next 6 months proving that this isn't just fake engagement adrenaline. Lila looked up at him. This man who'd accidentally become her fake fiancé and somehow turned into someone she couldn't imagine living without. Ethan Sterling, she said, reaching up to straighten his bow tie. I love you, too, which is either the best decision I've ever made or evidence that Manhattan has driven me completely insane. Can't it be both? Lila laughed, and Ethan kissed her, and for a moment, the charity gala and the social expectations and the complicated future all disappeared. There was just Ethan and Lila, and the possibility that sometimes the universe really did know what it was doing. When they broke apart, Ethan rested his forehead against hers. So, fake fiancé, ready to go tell Manhattan society that we're the real deal. Actually, Lila said, sliding her arms around his neck, I think we need to update our contract. What kind of update? The kind where we admit that Clause 7 was always inevitable. Ethan grinned. Lila Martinez, you might be the smartest architect in Manhattan. I definitely am. And Ethan? Yes? Tonight, when you introduce me to your parents, you can tell them the truth. Which truth is that? That their son fell in love with a woman who invaded his hotel room, reorganized his life, and decided to stay forever. Forever? Lila looked around the penthouse that had become home, at the architectural drawings spread across the table, at the man who'd somehow become her favorite person in the world. Forever, or at least until you get tired of making me pancakes. Lila, that is literally never going to happen. 2 hours later, Lila descended the stairs of the Metropolitan Museum of Art on Ethan's arm, wearing midnight blue silk and enough emeralds to fund a small architectural firm. The museum had been transformed into a wonderland of crystal chandeliers, white roses, and Manhattan's social elite, dressed in their finest formal wear. Ready? Ethan murmured in her ear as they approached the receiving line where his parents waited. Margaret Sterling was exactly what Lila had expected. Elegant, poised, and radiating the kind of confidence that came from 40 years of hosting events where million-dollar donations were considered modest contributions. Edward Sterling was distinguished, silver-haired, and had the same blue eyes as his son. Mother, Dad, Ethan said, I'd like you to meet Lila Martinez. Lila, darling. Margaret immediately pulled Lila into a warm hug that smelled like expensive perfume and genuine affection. You're even more beautiful than your photographs. Ethan has told us so much about your work. It's wonderful to meet you, Mrs. Sterling. Thank you for including me tonight. Please, call me Margaret. We're family now. Margaret stepped back and studied Lila's dress approvingly. Elise outdid herself. You look absolutely radiant." Edward Sterling shook Lila's hand with a firm grip and a smile that reminded her strongly of Ethan. "Lila, I understand you're working on sustainable luxury resort design. I'd love to hear your thoughts on how green building practices can be integrated into high-end hospitality." "Dad," Ethan warned, "you promised not to talk business at social events." "This isn't business, son. This is curiosity about my future daughter-in-law's expertise." For the next 20 minutes, Lila found herself in an animated discussion with Edward about passive solar design, locally sourced materials, and the economics of sustainable construction. Margaret occasionally interjected with questions about Lila's background, her family, and her impressions of New York. "You know," Margaret said finally, "Ethan has never brought anyone to meet us before." "Never?" Lila asked, surprised. "Never. We were beginning to think he was married to his work." Margaret glanced at her son, who was being congratulated by a steady stream of family friends. "But watching him with you tonight, I haven't seen him this happy since he was 8 years old. And we surprised him with a trip to see the construction of the new hotel in Dubai." "He was excited about hotel construction at 8? "Darling, Ethan has been in love with the family business since he could walk. But tonight, he's in love with something much more important." Lila followed Margaret's gaze to where Ethan was talking to an elderly couple, gesturing enthusiastically about something that was making them laugh. As if he felt her watching, he looked over and smiled, the kind of smile that made Lila's heart do that complicated gymnastics routine again. "Mrs. Sterling Margaret, can I ask you something?" "Of course, dear. How do you know when love is real and when it's just circumstances?" Margaret studied Lila's face with the kind of understanding that came from 40 years of marriage and raising 2 children. "Lila, may I give you some advice, please? Real love doesn't announce itself with fireworks and orchestra music. Real love shows up in how someone pays attention to your dreams, supports your work, and makes you feel like the best version of yourself." Margaret paused. "It shows up in midnight conversations and morning coffee, and the way someone looks at you when they think you're not watching. And how does Ethan look at me when he thinks I'm not watching? Like you're the most fascinating person he's ever met and he can't quite believe his luck." Lila felt tears threaten again. "Margaret, what if I'm not sophisticated enough for this world? What if I don't know the right people or understand the social expectations?" "Lila, darling, let me tell you a secret." Margaret leaned closer, conspiratorially. "Half the people at this gala are worried about the same thing. The difference is, you have something they don't. You have integrity, talent, and a young man who would move mountains to make you happy. How can you be so sure?" "Because he spent an hour yesterday asking me about architecture books so he could understand your work better. Because he rearranged his schedule to attend your client presentation. Because when he talks about you, he doesn't talk about how you look or how impressive you are. He talks about how you think, how you solve problems, how you care about making the world better through your designs." Lila looked across the room to where Ethan was now talking to a group that included Catherine Prescott from the Avalon Resort Project. Catherine caught her eye and waved, gesturing for Lila to join them. "I think I'm being summoned," Lila said. "Go show Manhattan what a brilliant architect looks like." The rest of the evening passed in a blur of introductions, conversations about sustainable design, and moments when Lila caught Ethan watching her with an expression of genuine pride. She met real estate developers who wanted to discuss green building incentives, hotel executives interested in her resort concepts, and society wives who were surprisingly knowledgeable about architecture and urban planning. By the time they were back in the town car heading home, Lila felt like she'd been given a masterclass in Manhattan social dynamics. "That was incredible," she said, leaning back against the leather seats. "Your parents are wonderful. Catherine Prescott introduced me to half the real estate development community, and I think I may have accidentally agreed to design someone's summer house in the Hamptons. Mrs. Morgan, she's been looking for an architect for 2 years. Consider it your official welcome to Manhattan's luxury market." Lila looked at Ethan, handsome and relaxed in his tuxedo, his bow tie undone and hanging around his neck. "Ethan, can I ask you something?" "Anything? Earlier tonight, you said you loved me." "I did. I do. Did you mean it? Or were you just caught up in the moment?" Ethan took her hand and looked at her seriously. "Lila, I meant every word. I love your intelligence, your passion, your terrible sense of direction, and the way you make me want to be worthy of you. My sense of direction isn't terrible. Manhattan just has too many streets. You got lost in a hotel lobby yesterday. That lobby is unnecessarily large." Ethan laughed and pulled her closer. "Lila Martinez, Will you marry me for real this time? Lila looked at the engagement ring that had become as natural as breathing, then at Ethan's face and the glow of the city lights streaming through the car windows. Ethan Sterling, are you proposing to your fake fiancé? I'm proposing to the woman I fell in love with, who happens to be wearing my emergency engagement ring. In that case, Lila said, leaning up to kiss him, yes, absolutely, yes, but I want a real proposal with a real ring and a real wedding that your mother gets to plan exactly the way she wants. Deal. When? What? When do you want the real proposal? Lila considered this. Surprise me, but not while I'm wearing yoga pants. I make no promises about the yoga pants. 6 months later, Lila stood in the penthouse that had become home, wearing yoga pants and her favorite I'm Not Arguing t-shirt, working on architectural plans for her third major Manhattan project. The Avalon Resort had been featured in Architectural Digest. Her Hampton summer house had won a sustainability award, and Stonewell Architecture had offered her a full partnership. Ethan emerged from his office, having finished a conference call about the successful Tokyo hotel acquisition, and found Lila surrounded by drawings, coffee cups, and the controlled chaos that always accompanied her creative process. Lila Martinez, he said, getting down on one knee next to her chair, will you marry me? Lila looked down at him, then at the new ring box in his hands, this one containing a custom-designed emerald-cut diamond set in sustainable gold. Ethan, I'm wearing yoga pants. I told you I made no promises about the yoga pants. Lila laughed, set down her pencil, and looked at the man who'd accidentally become her fake fiancé and intentionally become the love of her life. Yes, Ethan Sterling, for real this time, forever and always. Yes, as he slipped the new ring onto her finger next to the emergency engagement ring she'd refused to give up, Lila realized that sometimes the best things in life really did start with waking up in the wrong room with the right person. So, Ethan said, pulling her down onto the floor next to him, ready to plan a real wedding with my mother? Ready as I'll ever be. But first, I have something for you. Lila reached into her portfolio and pulled out a set of architectural drawings. I've been working on these for weeks. Ethan studied the plans, his expression shifting from curiosity to amazement. Lila, this is the renovation plans for the Sterling Hotel Chicago, sustainable luxury, local materials, and energy systems that will make it the first carbon-neutral hotel in the Midwest. You designed this for me. I designed it for us, for our future, for the family business that's about to get very interested in sustainable hospitality. Ethan kissed her, long and sweet and full of promises about pancakes and partnerships, and forever. Lila Martinez Sterling, he said against her lips, you're going to revolutionize the hotel industry. We're going to revolutionize the hotel industry. Partners, remember? Partners, Ethan agreed, in business, in life, and in the ongoing project of figuring out how we got so lucky. Lila looked around the penthouse at their combined life scattered across every surface, his business reports mixed with her architectural drawings, their morning coffee cups sitting next to hotel prospectuses and sustainable design magazines. Ethan, yes, I think the universe knew exactly what it was doing when it put me in your hotel room, even if you did reorganize my entire life? Especially because I reorganized your entire life. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, Manhattan sparkled with possibility, and inside the penthouse that had become home, Lila and Ethan began planning their real future, complete with sustainable hotels, spectacular architecture, and a love story that had started fake and become the most genuine thing either of them had ever experienced. And somewhere in Chicago, Emma was already planning her maid of honor speech about how her best friend had accidentally become Manhattan royalty by getting lost in a hotel. Some stories, Lila reflected, really did have perfect endings. The